really becomes a matter of how many of these people are going to stand their ground and how many of them are going to heed the warnings and the admonitions of the officers to move back. Right now, the major area of concern seems to be right near that open area that goes into a garage that goes under the Romney building. And that's where the big concentration of that 40 or 50 group of state police that I have just followed over here have just gone. And now it looks like they are going to physically go in front of that area to block it, to make sure nobody gets down there. And I should point out that there is security beyond that point as well. It's not like that's an opening to the building. And again, I should point out, we don't know if the governor is even in the Romney building today. We have no indication of that. But what we do know is there are several hundred people that are standing in front of where his office is, at very least. And the crowd is really not moving much. They are here, and if anything, perhaps getting a little noisier and more agitated, Susan.
And well, Rick, you know, even despite all these protests that have been going on, the legislation has moved right along. Here we have our pictures once again. The state police trying to make sure things remain calm in that area, although it is getting unruly and, as you say, louder. We really don't know if the governor is going to sign this legislation, but the protests really don't seem to be slowing down the process either.
No, and I think there's every indication the governor will. If he doesn't sign it now, it will be a huge breakdown in what has been a pretty clear path. You know, it was last Wednesday night that I stood on the Capitol grounds and told you that all of my sources told me that despite what we had heard for the past 2 years, that right-to-work legislation was going to be moved in the Senate and it would pass. Well, indeed, that happened. That happened very next day on Thursday. One of those bills had to lay over for 5 days. That takes us to today, and this was the first time the House could take it up, and they did in short order. They started this morning. They were done by 2 o'clock this afternoon, prior to 2 o'clock this afternoon with both of those bills. And as you say, all that remains is for the governor to sign it, and that's what this protest has taken on now. It has taken on an air of trying to convince the governor not to sign something that he has said in the past he was not particularly interested in. But I think we've gone over this any number of times for our viewers, and that is that the governor, having let this legislation go forward, has tacitly indicated, and even more than that, by doing a news conference earlier this week and saying that he would support this legislation, has said that he would go ahead and sign it. And that's the only reason Republicans put those votes up. They wouldn't go through all of these votes and have to face all of this pressure if there was any question that the governor was going to sign it. So unless something goes terribly wrong in this political calculation, the governor will sign this legislation. The question is, will he sign it today? Will they move those bills over today? Or will it come in the next 24 to 48 hours?
That is indeed the question. Rick Albin, thank you for your analysis there. Joe LaFurgey is standing by in the crowd right outside the Romney building right now. Joe, what are you seeing?
We've seen a standoff between state police and those against the right-to-work legislation that Rick said the governor is going to sign this afternoon. It is a major standoff. You can see police have crossed Capitol Avenue. We have demonstrators here and behind us as well. They're kind of moving in together. State police have made a number of arrests so far. They've been trying to get into the Romney building, which we're just outside. Of course, the Romney building is where the governor's office is located. They have tried to get in there. There have been, I'm not sure how many arrests exactly. Some of the protesters have been arrested as well. And you can hear the chants.
This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like.
Again, the crowd very angry here.
That's right.
Mad they shut off the road, and obviously some are mad because they can't get into that building as well. So what started out as pretty much peaceful demonstrations earlier this morning that we told you about. You remember that tent coming down live on the air about 11 o'clock, and it has evolved into this standoff here in the middle of Capitol Avenue, in front of the Capitol and in front of the governor's office, with these protesters not budging, state police not letting them budge either. They came in a few minutes ago and started moving them north down Capitol Avenue, but then there was a backfill of protesters coming in from the south, and they've kind of sandwiched us all in here. So there has been no more movement as far as moving some of these protesters down back to the north. They're at a standstill, again, a kind of a standoff right now. It doesn't look like anybody's going to move for a while.
Joe, you've been there all day. Tell us a little bit about how the protests have changed. Do you think, as it's grown throughout the afternoon to this point, is the crowd getting even angrier? We have heard about some pepper spraying. We've heard about some arrests. What's your gauge right now?
Yeah, we've heard about the pepper spray incidents. We've been trying to confirm that throughout the afternoon. But yes, not necessarily the crowd. Not that the crowd is necessarily larger, but it has grown more. Well, I guess the best term is angry. Obviously, when this thing came down in the House, before that vote happened, there was some feeling that maybe this would go down to defeat. But as it passed the House, and as it headed to the governor's office, we all know the governor's already said he is going to sign this. That seemed to be where the tension picked up quite a bit, and the tensions really started to boil over. We're trying to move here. We're trying to give you these live pictures, let the protesters do their thing, and let state police do their thing as well. But again, we're right in the middle of all this, and so we're trying to move and keep out of everybody's way and still bring you these pictures. But it is pretty amazing to watch all of this going down. All of this going down in the middle again of Capitol Avenue.
Joe, and as earlier we were talking about how historical this is for the state of Michigan, the UAW's birthplace. 1936 sit-in strike. This is huge. This is national news, and the way that Michigan, the state itself, is approaching the way it will work with unions, it's amazing.
Yeah, it really is, and you and I have probably had this discussion because we are from that side of the state where auto is king and always has been, and you know the history well, Sue, of organized labor. Again, born in 1936, UAW in Flint, and who would have thought, and we've said that over and over again, that this issue would not only come to the legislature, would be passed in such a quick manner. So you can get a good understanding of the passion of these folks that are involved in organized labor, why they're out here. Question their tactics, and I make no judgment on that, but you can understand the passion of what goes into all of this. As again, we're being moved back. There's some movement by state police here in this line they've created. It looks like they're moving more towards the front of the Romney building and one of the entrances here to the Romney building off of Capitol Avenue, but they're still blocking as many of these protesters as they can.
No justice! No peace! 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 No justice! No peace!
Joe, we're sort of just letting this breathe a little bit to see what's going on out there, to get the feel and show our viewers exactly what's going on outside the Romney building. I will bring you up to speed a little bit. This is the right to work. These are protesters taking issue with the right to work legislation that has passed the House and Senate and now moves on to the governor's desk. As we spoke with Rick Albin a little bit earlier, we are unclear as to whether or not the governor will sign it today or tomorrow, perhaps. If crowds dissipate, it's just unclear at this time. But he has said in the past that he has every intention of signing it. There's Rick Albin with Joe right now. I do know that there have been some arrests. We have heard reports of pepper sprays. Earlier in the day, a tent was ripped down on the grounds of the Capitol. But so far, we're not hearing of any injuries to speak of. Joe, what are you hearing on that front?
Well, we have heard the possibility of some pepper spray incidents. I think we've been reporting, I'm not sure if we've confirmed it, that former Congressman and State Legislator Mark Schauer was hit by pepper spray at one point in time. We haven't been able to confirm that here on the ground. That is one of the injuries we've heard. Of course, you saw that tent come down earlier today. No injuries there, but some pretty frightening moments for the folks that were inside that tent. As far as protesters, we haven't seen any injury at this point to any of the folks that are demonstrating out here as well. We have seen, again, some of those arrests, but as you can guess, it is hard to make your way around this crowd. We're doing the best we can, trying to get through here, and as I said, trying to keep out of everybody's way and just kind of let the story unfold so you can see it. But as far as any major injuries, all that information is there has been none to this point.
Okay, Joe, thank you. Just starting to continue to watch this unfold there, and just starting to really get a gauge of how things are happening at the state capitol as that legislation moves on to the governor's desk. Rick Albin has been following this situation as well. Leon Hendricks is out at the Capitol. We do have, of course, many angles to what's happening in the state's Capitol for you to give you an idea of what's going on with this right-to-work legislation. I can tell you that all eyes are on Michigan as this legislation moves through. And the governor has said that he does indeed plan to sign it when he receives that legislation. We don't know if it's later this afternoon or if it'll be tomorrow, but it is something that we're continuing to watch for you, and we will continue to break in and give you any live updates. Rick Albin joining me once again to talk more about this. The tension's picking up out there a little bit. Rick, any idea? You had mentioned earlier, and I found this interesting, this issue, if it passes after the governor signs it, when he does, and he says he will, this cannot come up for a vote to the people anymore, can it?
No, not without extraordinary measures, and that's because there was an appropriation that was put into this bill, which means when there's an appropriation put in, it can't be put on the ballot for a referendum. You remember back to this last election cycle, there was the emergency financial manager law that was used as a referendum. It was defeated. The law was defeated. The reason it was able to go on the ballot is because there was no appropriation associated with it. So on this particular law, labor law, they have put an appropriation in, and consequently it cannot go on the ballot in that manner. Now, there is a way that you can get it on the ballot, and it's much more complicated, but it can't be done by a simple process like a referendum. But what the process really amounts to now is getting this bill from the House to the governor, and then if he is going to sign it today or tomorrow or the next day, whenever that's going to take place. And right now we just don't know. We don't know what that process is going to be. I've spoken with the governor's office. They either haven't decided or aren't saying right now. And what all of these folks are doing out here, and what Joe has been talking about over this past half hour or so, is they're trying to convince the governor not to sign this. They have all kinds of signs. They're saying, don't sign the legislation, reminding him that he had said in the past this wasn't part of his agenda. And that's what these people are out here for now, to try to remind him of that and try to prevail upon the governor. But as we talked about earlier, this is a process that started last week. And as it started, it picked up momentum in a big hurry. And once the legislative leaders, the Senate Majority Leader and the House Speaker, had come to an agreement that they were going to go ahead and run this legislation, it became very unlikely that any party was going to back out. In fact, last Thursday, while the Senate was passing two bills that will ultimately become law, the House passed another bill that was really very little more than just a measure to get those members on the record for voting for right to work. So over that 5-day period that those two bills had to lay over, people didn't start getting cold feet. So the whole issue has been moving forward in kind of a nonstop capacity since then. And despite all of those people that were bringing their voices to be heard here in Lansing, there wasn't much of a chance that was going to change the process. And as we have seen up to now, it has not.